Hey everybody, I'm Bad as Fish 80. Welcome back to the Fish Tank, powered by Sneak Energy. Remember, use code FISH if you wish at sneakenergy.com. Now, I'm joined today by the one and only Deathshoot. Deathshoot, are you there, sir?
Yeah, that's me. Hello, hello.
Wow, you sound thrilled to be here.
Oh, I'm just ready to get the video started. All set, all set.
Good stuff. Now, if you watched our video yesterday, you would have seen a lot of the information about the upcoming changes to wildcards. We're going to cover those briefly today, and then we're going to also look at the new cards for the new expansion, as well as the balance changes. So we shall dive straight into that. Let's set this up here, get this up on the screen. Okay, so the new expansion is called Minion Masters Malediction. Sounds very ominous, and we can see some skeleton stuff there as well. Let's dive straight in and see what we can find. Okay, so this is going to be version 1.28. This is the start of a 3-month expansion. So remember, each expansion is 3 months, separated into 3 monthly seasons. At the start of each 3-month expansion, there's a free DLC, which will be coming soon, and of course, there'll be lots of cool stuff in that. Wildcards are returning, and we'll just discuss a little bit more in depth what that entails. We've got 2 new cards, we've got a new skin, and of course we've got the custom rebalance changes. So this patch has been slightly delayed for various reasons, and it's going to be dropping on Monday the 20th of September. Not long to wait. Okay, let's dive straight in to our first new unit. This chap is called Coax the Diplomancer. Looks fairly pog. Now
Yeah,
let's find out.
very good card art. And I'd also like to point out that it is a beautiful card, and I'd love to see the other Mancer cards, Spirit Mancer and Blast Mancer, get updated visuals to sort of not match this, but be sort of grand like this guy is, because they're old cards, and so they sort of have like an older look, and they're not exactly as polished as this guy. And I just love to see this guy's a great example of how cool the Blastmancer and Spiritmancer could look if they get some updated out.
Yep, so this is another part of the Mancer family, as Deathshoot suggests. Let's find out a little bit more about him. Okay, so he's a 6 mana, accursed, ranged minion. He's got 400 HP, so unlike the other Mancers, he's fairly substantial. Now, he does a couple of special things. Firstly, his attacks inflict Hypnotize, so whatever he's attacking will be hypnotized, and will therefore start attacking its friendly units. And then additionally to that, when you reach a Cursed Ascension, if you play it in an appropriate deck, then every time it gets a kill, or the unit it's attacking dies, it will raise a skeleton to spawn and fight on your side. How do we feel about this unit, Deathshoot?
So as you can see, it's got the same stats of the other Mancer cards, except this guy, he's got 400 HP. So you can't just take him out with a fireball. Like, he barely dies slash of him on, and that's if both lash hits take him out. So he's really tanky, and that's really important to note for a ranged minion who inflicts a special ability, because those are usually spell targets if they're powerful cards. And inflicting Hypnotize on your attack, that can wipe out a push if you hit the right minion. Like, if you have a Colossus push going and this guy lands on the Colossus, there goes basically, if not, your entire push except for that Colossus. And so you can get a ton of value if you play him correctly. And not only that, but I am thinking he will be a solid card on Stormbringer, because once he hits that 12 range, he'll be even safer to play, and he might be able to, reach across the middle of the arena easier, and you'll be able to like support him better, and he's just going to sit in the back even further back than you already will. But generally speaking, he seems like a solid card to me, and I am a bit worried about that HP. He's very thick.
Yep, and one thing I'm looking forward to seeing is the Accursed Ascension ability. If you see him just shredding into a Scrat Horde or something, he's going to be raising many skeletons to fight for your side. So this guy can certainly be a very strong card. It'll be interesting to see if people swap him into their Accursed decks and what kind of use they get out of him. Definitely an interesting new card. Okay, so that's the one of the 2 new cards.
And
Now,
this is also the legendary card, which means that he will be in the paid battle pass. So if you don't buy the battle pass, it will take a while to unlock him.
that's important to mention. And here's a little bit of card art that we see. I'm sorry, this is his in-game model. So as Deathshoot was saying, he looks fairly legendary compared to the other Mancers for sure. We'll see how his scale stacks up, but he looks like a fairly big chap. Right, so that's card number 1. Card number 2 is the Wild Stonebjorn. Basically, a great big bear. Let's find out a little bit more about the bear.
With rocks in him.
Yeah. So this is a 3 mana Stout Heart minion. So it's got 350 HP. It does 75 damage every 3 seconds, 25 DPS. But what differentiates it from other similarly statted units is it has a thick hide. And the thick hide means that it reduces any damage taken by 7 down to a minimum of 1. So if he takes a hit for 10, then it reduces it down to 3. If he takes a hit for 5 from something, it reduces it down to the minimum of 1. So this is an interesting card, Deadshot, if we compare this to something like the Warrior. How do you think this compares to something like that?
I definitely call the Stonebjorn stronger than Warrior, and that's a little bit interesting because Warrior's been a very strong staple card for a while as the cheap tank, and then it got the HP enough, and then we've had Joan Walker once bitten. But this guy, I'd say outclasses Warrior because he's so much more versatile. Like, imagine playing him to a Scrat Horde. He can tank that Scrat Horde for ages because where they normally do 10 damage, they'll do 3 damage, and not only that, but he does do 75 damage, which is kind of a lot for a 3-mana minion. And I'm honestly more excited for this card than I am for the Diplomancer because I really like cheap cards, and this is going to be a new, interesting cheap card. And a nice cosmetic feature is I love seeing that we're getting like a big animal in the game. I really like it when we get animal cards. I find them very interesting.
Yeah, we'll have a look at the in-game art, the in-game model in a second. But yeah, sometimes the new cards they add, they come and go. They don't really gain any traction, but this looks like definitely one that could maybe become somewhat meta. We see a lot of Warriors used at the moment, and this could definitely step in and fill that 3-mana tanky gap.
And also, while he may only be able to reduce damage by 7, he is only a 3-mana card, so it's not like you're spending a lot or very much mana at all to be able to reduce that damage. And so it's like, spending 3 mana for just that little damage reduction it's nice. It's just nice.
And especially in the current meta, things may change with the new season, but the current meta has seen a lot of Horde decks, and the way his thick hide works is it's going to be most beneficial against many units attacking him for little amounts. So we'll see how that stacks up. And then we'll have a look at what he looks like in the game. A little difference, we see this sometimes, a little difference between the artwork and the models, but this is what he currently looks like in the game, and it'll be interesting to see. But he definitely looks like a big tanky unit. Right, so those are the 2 new cards. As we always see in these expansions, we do also see a new skin. This is going to be a skin for Milloween, the Dark Stout Heart Milloween Legendary skin. So again, that'll be in the paid Battle Pass. And we can certainly look forward to working towards and unlocking that.
A beautiful skin. Even though it's a recolor, I think they did an amazing job.
I agree. Right, so that's the 2 new cards. Now we're going to talk about wildcards. So let's just very quickly go over the changes. Just to remind you, wildcards were in the game, then they were removed from the game, and now they're coming back. There's been many surveys to get feelings from the community on how they thought about wildcards and what different solutions could be in place. But now we have solutions. So what are we going to have? We're going to have no wildcards in 1v1. And I know that's something that Deathshot will be happy with as a very high level 1v1 player. 2v2 pre-mades, you'll have your usual 2 wildcards. 2v2 randoms, you'll have your usual 2 wildcards, but with a little caveat. And again, this is something we covered in depth in the previous video, but there's now a stat that each card has, and that determines how many copies of that card can be allowed. So if you have the stat copies allowed 1, that means you can only use 1 of them. You can't use any wildcards on it. copied allowed 2. You can use one of your wildcards on it. 3. You can use both of your wildcards on it. I don't want to go too much into this here, Deadshot, but just very quickly your thoughts on these changes based on what we thought was going to happen, based on the survey responses, and where we are now.
I think that the first month is going to be a bit of a feel out process, and then I'm hoping and sort of expecting, but mostly hoping that in 1.29 we'll see some changes to what they're allowing and not allowing to be wildcarded, and not just because I don't think anything's specifically problematic right now. We'll see what happens at the new season, but I'm really hoping to see that they're like on the ball with this, and I do think they will be.
Yeah. So again, check out the other video. You'll see exactly the list of cards that are restricted with the copies allowed strat. See exactly where we are with that. Okay, so moving swiftly along, let's jump into the balance changes. So these are the balance changes for patch 1.28, dropping on the 20th of September. Okay, so the first thing here is spirits. So spirits in general, they did get changed recently. They're getting changed again. So max health gain is going to go up from 300 to 400, and min health gain is going to go up from 0 to 50. So smaller units are going to get a better buff from the spirits now, and bigger units are going to get a better buff from the spirits. Basically, this is just an overall buff to spirits, Deadshot.
Yeah, I'm nice that they're adding a minimum so that when you land a spirit on the scrat, it isn't useless. I'm glad that they're making sure you'll get something from it if that's what happens with your spirit. And then the max health gain is kind of scary, partially because Morelia in her perks naturally gives you free spirits. And so it wouldn't surprise me if we see some Halloween decks bring out tanky units specifically for that spirit perk, because you can get a Reckonator up to 1,300 HP with spirits if you land a spirit on it, and that's pretty scary.
Yeah, there's a lot of units, a lot of these big units now that will benefit from this increased health. And remember, that's somewhat in reaction to all these big units getting a health nerf a few patches ago. Okay, so let's jump into the next change. Crossbow Guild. So Crossbow Guild, it's just underperforming at the moment. Its production time is going to be ramped up a little bit, so basically instead of getting 10 cycles, you get 11 cycles, and they come out a little bit more quickly. And again, the same sort of thing here with the Swarmer Totem. The production time has gone down from 6.5 seconds to 5.7 seconds. So instead of getting 6 lots of Swarmers, you get 7 lots of Swarmers. So hopefully that should bring those back more in line. Now the Priestess. Now remember, the Priestess recently had her attack removed. And one of the big offshoots of that is she doesn't stop to attack anything. She just carries on walking through. So what the devs have done here is they've reduced her speed from 3 to 2. So remember, all of the 2 speed units were removed from the were increased to 3 previously, but now we do have a 2 speed Priestess, which will just make her stronger. She'll stay with the battle longer. If it's a very long battle, she will still move through and get into harm's way, but this should make her, I think, in a more healthy spot.
Well, now with the speed of 2,
go ahead.
she won't be able to outrun your minions. She'll like always be in the back with a push, but then when you're in the fight, she won't immediately get to the front line. But now with the speed of 2, the only other 2-speed minion in the game is Veil Stalker. So if you place her correctly, then there's no way she gets in front of your push. She'll always be behind, and maybe even fall behind a bit, but that's kind of a good thing because she just walks forward in combat. So it is a nice buff, and I agree with this change. I just it is weird how we only have 2-speed minions in the game.
Yeah, and if you paid attention to what the Veil Stalker is like when she's stealthed, 2 speed is very slow. Okay, so now we're going to go through a bunch of changes that are all basically the same change. So here we see the Fireball. The damage is going up from 170 to 180. So doesn't seem like a big change, but that means that it will start being able to kill a few things, a few very key things that previously it couldn't kill. So at 180 damage, it can now kill a Boom Buggy, a Veil Stalker, a Soul Stealer, and a Laylail. All things it couldn't kill before. So do you think this is an important change? Just even though it's a small increase in damage, the fact it can now trade much better against these units and we'll see that this is something that a number of the spells are having as well. Do you think this is a good change, Deadshot?
For most of the spells, I think it's a very minuscule change, but for a few of them, I think it'll mean more. I'm gonna spoil a little bit here. It's only a few cards ahead, but I'd like to mention Magma Storm is going to 180 damage as well, and Fish will show you that in a moment. But I think it's more notable for Magma Storm because Magma Storm gives you 10, basically 10 fireballs. So that means that you'll be able to easily kill units that have like 350 HP, such as the new Stout Heart minion we're getting, or Whirly Shredder, or Warrior. And so that's, different than these other spells that are getting the same damage buff. But for generally speaking, this does mean Fireball does more face damage. So that can mean something in the match because, every hit point matters, right? So this could actually kill the opponent sooner. And Boom Buggy is definitely not going to like this change.
Very true. So if we just quickly go through here, Dragon Ball again shares this 170 up to 180 damage. We've got Magma Storm, as Deathshoot said, 170 up to 180. Grasping Thorns, the same damage increase. Also Hellfire from the TAS. Now, how do you feel about this? I've seen the Hellfire, the TAS, very strong, especially in duos. Do you think this is a change that it needed, or do you think this is a change where they were just keeping everything in line with each other?
I think that they really wanted to keep their spells in line with their damage, and I don't think it's going to be something serious to worry about. I think that this won't change the power level of too many cards. It's just a little oomph that they're getting.
Okay, so Smite also going up to, oops, just dropped past that, also going up to 180, but it's going up from 150, so it's a much bigger increase. We see some changes here to the Ardent Argus. So remember, this is the spell you cast on a unit. It takes a small period of time, and then it does its thing, which is to generate some more units and potentially heal it. So here we see now the delay has gone down from 4 seconds to 3.5, so it's more likely to actually activate and not be too late before the unit dies. And the healing is simply just going up a little bit from 250 to 275. So just a few changes there just to make it a bit more beneficial to use. Now we've got the Rampage with the cast delay down from 2 seconds to 1 second. And I think Rampage is in kind of a strange spot because there's so many other ways in the game that you can get raged units, from Volko, from King Puff. How do you feel Rampage is in the game at the moment, Deathshoot?
I've actually played it a bit in randoms and pre-mades because I think it is usable on the Spellmasters like Setsu and Meluine, because if you use it on Meluine, that's a nice buff, and I think it is a bit underrated because you're only spending 2 mana. It's an instant. It's got a big radius, so you can actually hit, like, if you have a push coming in from both sides, if you place it correctly, you can rage both sides of your push. And with this Castellet buff, it's going to be a lot easier to use offensively. And I do think it's playable, but I agree that there are a lot of other better ways to get rage.
Okay, so moving on, we've got Daggerfall. They've added Cool Slitherbound to that just to buff it a little bit. So of course, Cool Slitherbound is where it attaches a slither to another appropriate card. So sometimes doesn't really help much, but in slither decks it can really help. Same sort of thing, or exactly the same thing with the Stun Lancers, added Cool Slitherbound 1.
I'd actually like to talk about the Slitherbound changes.
Okay.
Because Daggerfall, I don't think that this is going to do much of anything for Daggerfall. Mainly because, personally, I don't like running Slither spells in my Slitherbound decks, because when Slitherbound land on a spell, you can't decide where they spawn, they just auto-spawn at the tower. I'd like to see Daggerfall have synergy with Slitherbound and get its own Call Slitherbound interaction, because it just gets outclassed by Poison Strike, Vortex, Resonating Blast Crystal, Shock Rock, and I'd really like to see them make it more of a unique character where it actually benefits from having a Call Slitherbound ability. I mean, it's Sacrifice Slitherbound, not Call Slitherbound, where it has its own ability where it like gains more damage if you have some Slitherbound. But Stun Lancers, I'm really glad to see that one, because this is a character you can auto-include in the Slither deck, so I think that it is a nice buff for Stun Lancers.
Good stuff. Okay, Blade Star. Now, Blade Star, of course, was one of the latest cards that they added to the game. Didn't get to see much play. It could be incredible in certain situations, the way it could bounce between a tower and a big unit many times, but with some strange bounces and just being pretty difficult to pull off. It just didn't seem to be played very often. So now they've increased the damage up to 130. So that means it's going to be able to go through more units. Remember, it goes through units until it hits something it doesn't kill, and then it bounces off. So just a straightforward buff here, and hopefully we'll see if that can become more of a played card. I think the problem with that at the moment, and I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, Deathshoot, is to get the maximum value out of it, you do have to bounce it off the tower and try to get it kind of lodged in between stuff, which really minimises the way you can play it. Especially, it means you can only play it offensively. Defensively, it's not really any good at all.
It's near impossible to use defensively, and with its damage buff though, it will be able to get through more stuff, which means that when there's a push coming in, you have a higher chance of being able to take it out with Blade Stare. But I do agree that the biggest issue with Blade Stare is that to actually utilize the bounce, you basically can only do it with the opponent Master Tower, because when doing it off of opponent minions, you might be able to get it right, but I think it's also kind of luck based, and you just sort of hope that you positioned it correctly. So I would like to see, it'd be nice if you saw the rebound of where it was going to go to, like when you see where a spell is being aimed, if when it was going to inline to hit something, if it had a curved aiming where you'd see where it would bounce to. That'd be really nice.
I think my biggest issue with it is the way that it seems to bounce off the tower just bizarrely sometimes. But who knows. Right, that's moving swiftly along. So we've got Shield Captain Avea. She's had her quest threshold reduced from 5 to 4. So that just means potentially one less cycle, one less activation required to complete her quest, which is to shield the friendly minions. Of course, once her quest is complete, she spawns with the Legionnaires. So she's a card we haven't seen too much, but now we may see more of her. She's able to get her quest completed quicker, you get that extra bang for your mana quicker, and can potentially get a lot more value out of her as the game goes forward.
This can be a pretty big buff, because if you can get out 2 quests in one play, and so now that it only requires 4 instead of 5, it is viable that you activate her in simply 2 usages. So I'm looking forward to see how that plays out.
Yep. Good stuff. Okay, so the healing fireball, we've got a cast delay reduced from 2 seconds to 1.5 seconds. We've all been in the situation where we throw a last ditch fireball and it just misses. This is designed to really just make that a bit less likely to happen. So just a straightforward buff and hopefully be less frustrating to play. Now Chain Lightning, we've seen some of the other cards get damage increases. Chain Lightning will now bounce to 12 targets instead of 10. So that means it does 100 damage per bounce, so it can put out up to 1200 damage now if it gets a full set of bounces.
It won't be eaten up by Horde as much. That's what I'm looking forward to. Yeah.
Again, we spoke about the Horde meta at the moment, and as Deathshoot said, sometimes it just bounces between the Horde, and before it even gets a chance to hit the meaty units you're trying to get to, the bounces have been eaten up. So this is just going to allow it to trade a bit more efficiently. Okay, this is one we probably expected to see. Defenso Chopper, hugely meta at the moment, especially again in the Horde meta. But it's been trading just too efficiently, so the health reduced from 500 to 450, and I'm sure this is a change you agree with, Deathshoot?
Yeah, Defensive Chopper has been around everywhere lately, especially in 1v1, but definitely in all game modes. And I don't know if this is going to do enough, but it's definitely on the radar. This proves that it's being watched, and even if this isn't good enough, then you can think that they might nerf it again next patch if it still sticks around.
Yeah, because I think the way that it works with the way it does its return damage and the stun is it almost feels like it should have less health than comparative units that don't have that kind of damage output and stun output. So as you say, we'll see how this stacks up in the next change. Now Wrecked Walker, against a card we've seen hugely used, especially with the Once Bidden. So the mana cost is going to go up from 1 to 2. Its health is going to be increased. So remember, it used to spawn damaged. It will now spawn as 150 full HP unit. But it will also have the ability for tech to be spent, 40 tech to be spent to reduce the cost of it by 1. So a couple of things there. because of the fact it's going to be spawning as a full HP unit, it's going to be not as easy to trigger the werewolf. You could almost guarantee a werewolf. Just 3 scrat hits, I think it was before, and you could get a werewolf from it if you used it with the once bitten. So I think this is a welcome change, Deathshoot, and maybe the Wrecked Walker will not be quite so much of an auto-include in decks anymore.
Well, I'm honestly not a big fan of it, simply because there's now going to be super or very little incentive to use this over Stint, because it's now going to have the same base cost as Stint, except that it doesn't attack, and with Stint, only for 10 tech more you can kind of have an instant bridge grab. So that is my concern. It's like now both these cards are very similar, except I think that Stint's better, which is kind of sad because this is a card I really enjoyed, but we will see if it still sees usage. It is quite possible that once bitten will still be a combo on it, so we'll see what's to come.
Indeed we shall. Okay, Howling Moon. So Howling Moon, remember, reduces everything, including friendly units, down to 50% HP. They've added it to have true damage, so that's just a straight buff to it. It means it's if you use it on a shielded unit, then the shield will not prevent the damage reduction. So that's a nice change for Howling Moon. Now, Commander Azali. We've seen Commander Azali everywhere in the current season. And the change they've decided to do is just to simply increase the mana cost. So the mana cost is going to go up from 8 to 9. So only a small nerf. But hopefully this will bring its power down a little bit. You won't be able to support it quite so much. Your opponents will have that extra mana really to deal with it. But we'll see. It does feel, I don't know if you feel the same, Deathshoot, but it does feel like her ability is just a little bit too strong at the moment. The fact it can shield everything on the ground. There's no range. There's no cooldown on it. She doesn't have to take a bridge. It just seems a little bit too good.
Yeah, that is what I was going to bring up, is that this is also a change I'm not a big fan of, because I want to see her ability get a leash put on it. Because I like to use Jean Blanc as a comparison. He used to not have a cooldown on his Void Jump, so you could just instant play another spell as soon as he appeared, and have a stun lock on units. And that's sort of what I think of Azali. There's no cooldown for when her ability happens. Like, you can just like spam it on the bridge and constantly get it again. And there's no maximum units, there's no range, there's no required time to be on the bridge. I just love to see some sort of restraint on her ability.
Yeah, I think if they did restrain it in some way, then it would make it more of a skillful card to use. But of course, they've just got to be careful not to nerf it too much. But this is the first change they've gone with, simply nerfing the mana cost. We'll see if that's enough to bring it in line. If not, then the devs will revisit it, I'm sure, and see what appropriate changes need to be made. And there's been a generic werewolf nerf. Their attack cooldown just reduced from 0.9 seconds to 1 second. Werewolves just in general were overperforming. So if we think back to the change to the Howling Moon did get buffed with the true damage, but it also got a little bit of a nerf as well, with the werewolves not being quite so good.
Yeah. Go for it.
No, I was just gonna say, and that is those are the balance changes. So, just to remind you, we got the 2 new cards, we got the new skin, we got a host of balance changes. Wild cards are coming back, but not quite as we know it. Deadshot, are you excited for the new Malediction season?
I do love the new characters they're bringing in. I know there's going to be more great ones to come, and I'm especially excited for the ones in this specific patch. And it is, of course, important to remember, as Fish mentioned at the beginning of this video, that there's going to be a free DLC. So you want to pick that up, because that can get you a ton of glory on your cards, some free power tokens, and maybe some other goodies. It's always worth it.
Yep, free DLC is always nice to see. So I think that's everything that we wanted to cover in this video. Deathshoot, as always, thanks so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure. Always learn something from you.
No problem.
And we'll see you guys again soon here in the fish tank. This is Bad as Fish 80 signing out. Take care.